Well, I want to welcome you all to the Kentucky Sustainable Living Festival, and we really appreciate you coming to hear us speak. This is my husband Philip, and I am Barbara Sue Kowalski, and we have the blog and YouTube channel Kowalski Mountain. Now today we're going to talk to you about preparing for winter beekeeping, but if you go onto our blog and YouTube channel, you're going to see all things homesteading. We raise and milk Dexter cows. We raise our own food. We had an 8,000 square foot garden this year where we raised food for ourselves and our animals. I like to cook with real food, so I use fresh ground flour. We put up a lot of our own food. Even if we don't grow it, we still preserve it on the farm. I do soap making, which you can see my soap in our booth today. I like to use natural ingredients for my soap. They're only scented with essential oils and they don't have any colorants in them. We also do DIY projects. Philip is my MacGyver, so he MacGyvers everything on our farm and makes it work. So we feature that on our channel. And we are also a modern off-grid homestead. Now what I mean by that is we live off-grid. We have solar power, we haul in our water, and we also are planning to do rain catchment. We're building our homestead, so we're not there yet, but we're on our way. And I say we're a modern off-grid homestead because you are not going to see me doing my laundry in a bucket. I have a washing machine, I fuel that with a generator, and I have no plans to change that. Now I also want to thank Shelli and Jason for inviting us to this festival. We're really excited that you all came to hear us speak.
Preparing a apiary is a year-long endeavor. It's not just pick it up and run with it just because we're getting into the winter. Just like us as homesteaders, there's certain things that you want to do to get yourself ready for winter. You don't wait until November to start cutting your firewood when you need it at the end of November or December. You want to go ahead and prepare yourself in advance. And setting up our homestead, what do we want? Location, food source, security, all those kinds of things. Well, bees doing the same thing. 3 approaches to winter beekeeping. The food source, they need a significant food source. So what I try to explain is the location. Not only does the food source apply, but weather conditions, what kind of water source. If you have all those three things in play, you're more than likely going to be more successful as long as you did all the other things in prep coming up to it.
Now with the 3 approaches to beekeeping that people have, and this is a general term, I'm sure there's more than 3 approaches, but there's 3 general approaches. Your first approach is your people, they don't do anything different than they did all year long. They put their bees in their little boxes and they do just fine, and they don't do anything extra for them. Now the bees need a lot of honey reserves to make it through the winter because bees are not warm-blooded. They do generate heat through their own body movements. They actually vibrate their wing muscles. Their wings are not actually moving, but they vibrate those muscles to create heat. And that takes a lot of honey to do that.
Who's the beekeeper in the crowd now? All right. At what temperature did the bees stop flying? Everybody agree with 55? A little bit cooler. About they'll be doing about, yeah. I've seen them about 50 degrees, and that's about a rule of thumb, between 50 and 55. Go ahead.
Now the next group of people, when they're preparing their hives for winter, is they are the ventilation group. They believe in ventilating their hives to create a warmer environment for those bees to help hold in their heat. Now the con side of an insulated hive is that Philip and I still live in our RV. We haven't built a home yet. So basically we live in an insulated box. And when we insulate this, that's what the bees are doing as well. So the bad part about that is when it's already cold outside, you can go out of the RV and it's going to feel beautiful out there in the sunshine. But the inside of the RV has not warmed up yet. So while the bees could be outside foraging and enjoying the sunshine, they don't know it's warm outside because they're also holding the cold inside their ventilated box. Now the third group of people that we're going to talk about today are the people that ventilate their hives. And they don't necessarily add any of the extra insulation, but they put those ventilation boxes at the top. So you know that the warm air is going to rise, and with that it's going to draw the condensation that the bees are creating out of the hive, because wet bees are dead bees. If the condensation creates on the top of the hive box and drips down on the bees, they're going to die. With your insulated box, your condensation, well, if you do it right, let's say that. If you do your insulation right, your condensation is going to draw on the outsides of the box, not on the ceiling. So there will be moisture in the box, which the bees need water in order to digest their honey, but it won't be raining down on them.
What is something that I can do with this box that would determine where that moisture is going to fall? Anybody? What's that? Shake it? Well, no. Anybody else? So, what do you do with your hives in a normal season to help them keep a cleanly box? What do you do as a normal practice? It's kind of a rule of thumb if you had the right mentorship. So, if you leave your beehives perfectly level, then if you ever open up your boxes, you're going to see a lot of debris and stuff that's collected inside the hive. But if you slightly tilt your box forward, entrance side down, it gives them a little more advantage to actually cleaning out the hives, to take out the dead, to clean out all the extra pollen, the bugs, the works. So moisture is the same way. So if it's slightly tilted, it actually gives them a more advantage. Now, you see that I have shavings. Sawdust, what do you think sawdust is going to do when it collects the moisture at the top? It's going to absorb it. It's going to clump up, right? So it doesn't allow the airflow. This will actually collect the moisture and also creates the airflow. Now, if you noticed, this box, I particularly have the insulation down on the bottom. This right now is where the bees are going to be. With that being said, this can go on the top of the box because this is where we're going to allow the ventilation. Okay, stay in the I'm not an actor, I apologize. I'm going to follow you. And I wanted to show them this. So, with my box, you know, this is the way we have it set up where the bottom's actually insulated. Some people don't put any insulation, but they might just do ventilation. We try to do a little bit of both, what best fits. We're just stewards to the bees. We're just there to help them out, try to keep everything as natural as possible. So with this box that I have here, I can lift this off. Now you see I have my feeders underneath there. So up until it becomes freezing temperatures, I can feed them my sugar water. And then when I'm done with that, then I just take this off and remove it, which they can only get to the jars through the holes. So I don't have to worry about them escaping when I'm feeding them. If you haven't done this, they can't get out. They can't come into the top box. So you can take and change them out, and these are also screened as well. So you change out the jars and go with it.
Now, one of the cons of using a ventilated box with this is they are going to lose heat as well, because that heat's going to rise and it's going to go out of your ventilation holes. Now, to give you an idea, as you think about the different methods of beekeeping that you might want to choose on your homestead, is we want to look at the science and see if the bees live in the wild, what are the bees going to choose? If they get to pick where they live, what kind of house are they going to pick out? Well, most of the time they're going to choose live trees because live trees are denser and they're going to be more warm. So when this tree right here, this was actually on our farm. We extracted these bees out of this tree that was growing on our farm, and this fits this profile perfectly. It's a live tree, it's denser. Above the beehive is infinite amount of wood. There's a tall tree, it's very thick coverage on the top. You can see right here on the sides, these walls are very thick that are around the bees. And then they typically have bottom entrances, which was true to this hive. The entrance is actually down here on the bottom. Now they did have a backup entrance. This was a tree that was splitting, and we removed the bees actually pretty timely because within a month or two, the tree actually split, and we probably would have lost the bees. And we were able to get 3 colonies of bees out of this tree that we moved into our apiary. So when we're talking about the things today, think about what wild bees would do, and then you can have these considerations when you decide how to winter your bees.
Considerations for going into winter. Predominantly, we're in garden zone 6. A little bit of 7, 7A, but mostly 6. So if you decide to go into the winterization method, you want to consider the health of the colony. Like I said, everything is a continual upkeep on as far as bees go. So food source, what did you have in the area? Did you have your water source? Did you check for mites? All these things lead up to being successful going into the winter. As far as your queens are concerned, how many people that are beekeepers had an issue with queen cells and them trying to requeen going into fall? Anybody? We did, and other people that are actually having booths outside also did, and some didn't even check their hives early enough, and they went out and they were all gone. And when they leave altogether, it's called absconding. When they leave with just the queen, they're swarming. So when you see a bunch of queen cells in there, they're wanting to find a new home. So they're looking for resources, weather security, the works, and they're going to leave you high and dry. So a lot of these things need to prepare you all the way up too, so don't just drop the ball. So we want to make sure that queen is actually doing her job. As far as that's concerned is, did she lay enough eggs coming up into the fall? Because what happens in the winter? They kick out the drones because all they're doing is consuming fuel, the food, and that's it. They don't have a purpose other than mating and eat.
And drones are male bees. That's who they kick out of the hive.
So we're looking at the production as far as what the queen's putting out eggs. Are the workers doing their job? Are they collecting resources? Are they not collecting resources? And when you look into a hive, you can see what they're actually concerned with. Either they're building up comb, or they're filling the comb in, or, you know what I mean? So they're tending to other bees. So you kind of want to steer in that right direction. So in the springtime, it's always a rule of thumb. You can do everything wrong and it'll come out right. You can do everything right in the fall and everything will come out wrong. Just everything lined up and it just failed for you. So beekeeping is one of those things, you're going to sink a lot of money into it. Do a lot of research, because what works for me might not work for you, and you're just a county away, or you're 10 miles away. So there's so many variables in there. Study people that are on YouTube and try things. And in the springtime is the best time to try those. As far as food storage goes, so what I have here are 8-frame boxes. Usually I will do 10-frame boxes. These are 5-frame boxes. So depending on the size of the colony, if you have too much space, they're not going to want to be there. They can't defend it. And put entrance reducers along the front. Also along the front are also mouse guards. So if you don't have a mouse guard on there, you might want to consider it, because I've had them go up into my hives, stress them out tepid.
And mice will actually live in the hive with the bees.
We were talking about the queen and her production rate. Now, if they requeened your colony, now you're stuck without the queen. She decided to swarm and leave with half your colony, most likely half your bees just left. You're in the fall, now you're stuck with these queen cells. Well, if the drones are already on their way out, very minimal chance. And the further you get into winter, the closer you're not going to have a chance at all. So the drones are not going to be there. So chances of them getting mated are pretty slim. So then you have to buy a queen from someone. Any ideas how much a queen will actually cost you if you had to buy one? Any ideas? $35 to
Someone
$100.
who's bought one.
$30 to about $100 for a queen, based on the genetics that you're actually looking for. And now they're coming out with all kinds of stuff now that help us with varroa mites and things along that line. If you had to guess how many pounds of honey in a 8 or 10 frame box would have to stow away in order to make it through the winter, how many pounds would you guess? And it's just a rough guesstimate. Nothing real accurate. What's up? 20 pounds?
I heard somebody say something.
Between 75 and 100 pounds, so you could pretty much say around 90, 80, 90 pounds. On these size boxes, what you're going to see happen is your bees are going to start out at the bottom. The queen will lay all her brood in the bottom, and then it goes in layers. They have their resources, and then they have their honey on the outside. And that's all your brood is up in the center, and that's where they will collect. But going into the winter time, they will actually move up into your upper box. So if you have two boxes without a divider, they'll move up into the upper one where it's going to be more warm, and they will establish their ground there. Now in the springtime, you might have to flip-flop boxes or change frames to move things around to make that actually happen. When we harvest our honey, I have taken 2 medium boxes, which are super boxes, which you normally see any beekeeper have, 10 frames. We took those 2 and drew them out. And how many gallons you think we got off of those just 2 boxes? Give you really a volume picture of how much honey that actually is. Anybody? 7.5 gallons. A little more picture of how much honey they have to put away. And that's what we spun out and left them nothing but empty comb. So give you an idea. No. And when doing beekeeping, you don't want to steal all the honey. So you got to leave them with the resources. Let me just make sure that's clear. You only take what's excess. So if you don't have that 90 pounds, that box, I just wanted to give you a picture on how much that actually was. Okay? Supplemental food sources.
Now this year we did draw honey or pull honey, but we didn't actually draw it out of the comb. We put all of the honey in the freezer because we were concerned that the bees might not have enough. So we put that away, and we can feed that honey to any of the colonies. We'll put those honey frames right back into the boxes, and then the bees will eat it. Because honey is bees' way of preserving food for the winter. Now there's lots of other ways that you can feed bees. Does anyone know one of the primary ways people might feed bees? What do they feed them? Sugar, yes. So nectar's predominant ingredient in that nectar, which bees make honey with, is sucrose. So the closest thing that we have to sucrose is sugar. Now we like to eat a clean diet or cleaner diet than as we can. And so we buy raw sugar. Well, raw sugar has additional ingredients in that raw sugar that's actually not good for the bees. So when you're feeding bees, you actually want to use that plain old white sugar that a lot of people use in their kitchens. Now, when the temperatures are warm, we can feed sugar water. And going into the fall, when the bees are still really active, people are feeding sugar water after you've pulled off your honey, because you don't want your honey to be full of sugar water. You want it to be made with real nectar and be real honey. Now, some of the other things that you can feed bees, they do feed them pollen patties. They feed them protein patties. We can feed winter patties, and all of these different things give the bees the protein and the things that they need. Now, one of the other things that we feed is called sugar bricks. Now, you can make sugar bricks by drying it out. Now, we actually made sugar bricks in the freeze dryer, which I'm really missing my mother-in-law's freeze dryer right about now. But we put these in the freeze dryer. We mixed it with some different ingredients. I think there's apple cider vinegar in there and some honeybee happy. And I think there's something else. I forget what it is. But
some people use essential oils and minerals and things like
yes,
that just to help them a little more perk.
And we cooked that in the freeze dryer for about a day. And those bricks were solid sugar. And we put those in for the bees to be able to eat on during the winter because that's not frozen and they can better digest that. Now, another method that you can do if you don't want to go to all the work or you don't have a freeze dryer, which I get, we don't have one either, is you can do what they call the mountain camp method. So right inside this box where Philip had his feeding stations, you could lay newspaper right over the top of your bee frames and just pour sugar right on it. plain white sugar, just pour it in there and mist it with water. That's going to make it all clump up. Now that sugar is going to do a couple different things. It's going to, for one, it's going to absorb moisture that's in your hives, and then it's going to give the bees the sucrose that they need. Sure. It shouldn't be.
Basically what they're doing is the paper is they're chewing it up and the section's small enough for them to carry away. It's very interesting. If you haven't seen bees clean their hive out, they'll tear up, this is a wax paper here. They'll eat all this stuff and then they'll cut this in strips long enough for them to pick up, and they'll fly it right on out of the hive. And you just watch that thing for as long as you can see it, and they just take it forever, and then they deposit it somewhere else. Same thing they do with anything else. That's how they do it, so it doesn't affect them. Now, I'll back up because there's a little more science into that. So, the ink, when you touch it, it does get on your fingers, correct? What do you think happens when you touch wax? Anything that's on your hands can get transposed to the wax, correct? Same thing with the ink. So yes, won't hurt it, but it does get collected. Just elaborate a little bit further on that. Same thing with pesticides. They bring it back, it gets stuck to the wax comb. Good.
Now, varroa mites are another thing that you want to be prepared for when you go into the winter. So varroa mites, this is actually a varroa mite right here. This is on the brood. This is the actual pupa inside the honeycomb. And this is likely a drone cell because the varroa mites like the drone cells because they're much larger than the worker bee cells. And they can also live on the bees. So this is a varroa mite here as well. And those are just pests, and they can take over and overrun your beehives and eventually can kill the hive. So, you want to go into the winter with less than 3% of varroa mites. Now, when we lived in Florida, we treated our bees 3 times a year for varroa mites. I think we do it 4 here in Kentucky. Now, varroa mites is one of those things, some people use different chemicals, and you should always rotate those so that your mites don't get used to them and it stop being effective. Now, some people also keep a very natural hive and they don't use any types of chemicals in their hives at all.
We're really back to observing the bees. If you don't learn your bees, learning what your bees do is just like watching your kids. You know what foods they like. You know how they like to dress. You know whether they're cold, they're hot. You know when they're sick. If you got a little pale face, they're probably, getting a little on the sick side. If you got real blush cheeks in the middle of summer, they're a little dehydrated. You understand where I'm coming from? A lot of things the same. So paying attention to your bees, I had the opportunity right outside my window to have them from me to that door, and I can look out the window and see my 15 colonies and watch where my early risers were, my late risers. I can find out which ones are doing orientation flights. You start to understand what your bees are doing, and you develop that relationship, and you understand what's right and what's not right. So when you get into beekeeping, those of you who are not beekeepers yet but are still learning, definitely recommend do some studying up, watch some YouTube, come up with some questions. Then find you a mentor to poke those questions at and seek the answers. And then it'll start guiding you in which direction you want to go with beekeeping to make more sense of the whole project. Making sure, like I said before, is making sure the queen's doing her job. Because right now we're doing overall activity, making sure the queen's doing her job. We're making sure the workers are stockpiling resources. This now, doing a nature walk, makes you start wondering what's in bloom. There's pollen out there, but it's not nectar. They're not making honey from pollen, they're making it from nectar. So what are some of those flowers out there? So we just had goldenrod, which is some of the things my wife infuses with her soaps, that they go get their last ditch effort of getting nectar to stockpile the colony to get them through the wintertime. And if they don't have it, we got to help them out. So we kind of took them out of their natural habitat to accommodate us, to help self-pollinate. Maybe we can sell some bees, sell some honey, whatever, for our medicinal purposes, but we got to give back a little bit too. Keeping in mind that the activity declines and stops around 50 degrees, okay? Drones will be evicted by the first frost, okay? There's signs of tracheomites or clusters of dead bees unable to fly. See what looks like a K-wing. They just look off, just out of place. So those are some of the signs maybe a little lethargic, they're real sluggish, out of category. So you need to find out what's going on with those bees and do some research on them. As far as numbers go, if I have a small colony, now this is a 5-frame box. If they're only filling like 2-3 frames and I have another box that fills, maybe this one is an 8-frame, but I'm only filling 6 frames, maybe I can consolidate. So anybody got an idea how I can consolidate the 2 boxes? Anybody? So newspaper, good. See, someone that's not a beekeeper is already taking some notes somewhere. You had an answer? Newspaper? Okay. So if you have a choice of picking a queen that might not be doing her job, and you know one is doing her job, that's the one you go with. Not necessarily the size of the colony, because you might have just replaced her, but she just doesn't have the workers to do the job. You can put that queen in, put a piece of newspaper in, put the 2 boxes on top of each other, they'll get used to each other, and then go ahead and merge. If for some reason I've got this colony, and I always recommend that people get into beekeeping, get 2 nukes, which is the 5-frame box. Get 2 of those. Because how can you compare just by looking at one? You can't. Unless you have another beekeeper that's next to you. So you want to have 2 colonies so you can compare what right looks like. If your numbers aren't what they need to be, maybe you need to pinch a queen, but your other boxes, you can't steal one from them. It's too late in the season. You got to buy a queen. And then you look for the genetics that you're looking for. If you got an aggressive colony, pinch that queen and just put another one in there. Honestly, what I do first is I actually take that queen out. I take a couple frames, I stick her in another box in another location on the farm, and I let them re-queen, or I'll put another queen in. Either option works. Let them go ahead and do the cells. Let them go ahead and reproduce another queen. And I can take that queen out after she's done her thing, and then bring my other queen back. And it's like she straightened right on up. I've done it several times. She straightened right on up. Next thing you know, that hive is jamming. She's doing great. Blowing the sides off. So after our numbers, we're looking at weather protection. What are some of the materials you could do or use to protect your colonies? There's multiple, but what are some of the ideas you might have to protect your colonies? Like say you have bad wind, right? You have the temperature. So I believe location is #1 priority. Some of you might live in a smaller community that you can put them behind a shed, or you have a tree line that's blocking them. They have to have that 6-foot flyway. So that's a wind block. Now, would you use hay? Would anybody use hay? Why not? Any ideas why? Moisture? Well, get hay bales around. Some people, what do you think is going to invite? Mice. Mice. So when you look at the front of my box, specifically on this one, I actually have 2 sides of the screen. So the one on the right hand side here, the bees can't get out and the yellow jackets can't get in. You reduce that entrance, so I try to give them some airflow, and then on this side it's a little bit larger so that the mice can't get in there, because they'll go in and they'll set up camp right below them, and then they stress the colony and they leave. So those are some of the stressors that you want to be aware of. Weather protection. So I wouldn't use the hay bales. People have been known to use a wind block around the outside, maybe tar paper. Maybe we're not cold enough to where we really have to worry about it, so tar paper would work. We're not super cold for very long, but also keep the mindset. Now, we're off-grid in an RV. We see the condensation, so we live kind of like that, because if the heat's greater inside than it is outside, we have the condensation. What's it do? It impacts everything the same way. As far as the weather goes, that insulation, we notice that it's warming up outside, but we're still cold inside. So it's warmer outside than it is inside. Open the doors, open the windows, let it all come in. So what I choose to do is a little bit of both worlds. I go ahead and I use a thinner insulation. What's it do? It creates a wind block for me, correct? And it also provides a little bit of insulation. I know that my colony is going to move up in the colony. up in the box. So they're going to be more protected. So with my boxes, I can take that top that I have here and I do the same thing and put it right on the top, and it's totally insulated. Now you can also take and lift your lid up just a little bit, and it lets a little bit of ventilation in if you don't want to use the ventilation method. As far as wind, how many people use that are beekeepers screen bottoms? Anybody? All right. This is the screen bottom, which is on the bottom of this box at this bottom, not this air. So this is what's there. Air can come on up. It's also got some other benefits because the bugs will fall through, debris falls through. They don't have to clean it as much. Falls right on out. They do have boxes that have slide trays that your sticky pads catch your bugs, and you can get a better count on them. I just put a board on the bottom. It's solid up. No air, nothing can come right up through the bottom. So it leaves them a little more protected. So in watching a lot of these YouTube guys, you come up with a lot of tips and tricks like, man, I didn't think about that. Or let's just say you're in a community that you want to do beekeeping, but they only allow you to have one colony, but I got like 4 colonies. Take this box, stick it on this one, turn it around backwards. You got an entrance out the back, entrance out the front. Total divider in the middle. They can't access each other, but you got what looks like one colony, but you technically have 2. So there's a lot of little things. DeMarie board will actually work in dividers. Consolidating your colonies, when we were talking about numbers before, might increase your chances of survival as far as your bees go. You know, I look at the springtime as a chance to restart and fix the mistakes that I made the last year. Go ahead and do some walk-away splits, make another queen, separate that box again, get back up to the numbers where you want to be, and try to make some notes, figure out where you messed up.
I don't think we need
So this is actually called a quilt box. And all I did is the same mesh that I use on the front that the bees can't escape. I just staple it right to the bottom. I use cedar, and yes, it is safe to use cedar. Not safe to use cedar shavings or stuff in chicken coops, however, but it is safe to use for the bees. And then I just use some shavings. Now you can use other material in there as well, as long as it's not going to clump up and it will allow that airflow.
Is that cedar for the boxes or cedar for the shade?
Could be both.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. So what's another benefit that goes way back? What's cedar good for? Exactly on cue. Because of why?
The boilers.
Moths.
Yeah.
So we have wax moth issues. That will stress out. So that wax moth is kind of like our vulture. They're the cleanup crew. So if you have a stressed colony and you see the wax moths, you've got a stressed colony. You need to do something about it. This will also help that. So it'll help keep them away. A little more of a retardant. It smells so nice. Any questions about the insulation before I go into the last part? Go ahead. Yeah. I would think with anything, if you understand how insulation works, you can either make it work or not make it work, depending on the same material, just how it's applied. When you think about your roofs in your house, so there's an air vent, okay, where your eaves are at. So that air is allowed to come on up, but it has access to the actual roof and above the insulation. So the insulation is technically just above the living space of your actual house. So if you had it everywhere else, it's a different type of insulation. So if it's applied right, it will definitely create that airflow and do this purpose of wicking that moisture to protect it. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so going into wintertime, there's something we got to remove before we go into winter. And that's going to be our honey supers. So we take off that queen excluder, which that queen excluder, all it does is doesn't allow the queen to go up into the honey and mess with it and lay brood. So you take that queen excluder off, take your honey super away, you assess your storage, do you have enough? Do you not have enough? And I put it away in the freezer. So that way, if I have a weak colony, I just add it back. We only use what we need to use and we stow the rest. Reducing space. I got this big old box, but I only have 4 frames. Is that going to be a good thing or a bad thing? Anybody? That'd be a bad thing, because if they have more space than they can protect, then they're going to get a chance of having the moths coming in. They're going to get stressed. They might even say, you know what, we need to go somewhere else smaller. So you might want to just step them down. So it might be a constant juggle. Feed as needed. She's already gone over what you can feed, when to feed. And we already talked about our screen bottoms. So we've gone over as far as how to insulate them, what to look for coming on up into, but most importantly, learning what your bees are doing and understand what right looks like.
Now, one of the nice things about winter beekeeping, now we moved here from Florida a year ago. Beekeeping in Florida doesn't really stop. You are full on beekeeping year round, and we had exploding hives there. But here in Kentucky, beekeeping does have that winter season where you're not going to be messing with the bees. They're going to be cold. When it gets to below that 50, they're not going to come out. If they have a nice warm day, they might go forage that day. But for most of the time, they're going to be inside of their hives. But that doesn't mean that beekeeping for you as the beekeeper stops. That is your time to prepare for spring. So if you have any equipment that needs to be assembled or painted or repaired, that's the time to do it. Now, as your bees use their honeycomb, we talked about the newsprint and how that can contaminate the wax. Over time, your beeswax changes from that pretty waxy color to this dark black color, and it just doesn't melt. It's garbage. And that's the time of year that you can take those garbagey frames, clean them up, and prepare them for the spring. If you are looking to order bees, you can buy bees. You want to do that as early as January. That's when you're going to start seeing those go on sale. And you want to put in your order so that you're sure to get some when spring comes.
There's some pros and cons on how to order them. If you want to know, you can ask me afterwards.
Now, some beekeepers also treat their bees for mites in February. You definitely want to wait for a warm day before you open the hives there. Now, March is a real critical time for your bees. That is actually the starvation month. You've got them through the cold. We're getting into the spring days, but we're into March where there's really not much blooming yet. Your bees have exhausted their honey supplies, and that's the time of year where a lot of beekeepers lose bees because of starvation. So you really want to watch those bees and make sure that they have something to eat. And if not, you definitely want to supplement them come spring to ensure their survival. Now, here on our blog, I do have a free beehive checklist, and if you scan the code, it'll take you right there. You can sign up for it, and you will get the free checklist. It takes you through all the steps about how to take care of your beehives, and it's going to get emailed to you, so you'll have it direct in your email.
One of the organizations that's actually here up front as well is Hives for Heroes. Me being a vet was a benefit, and I actually looked at it to see if I couldn't pick up some more information. Unbeknownst to me, until I actually looked at it to see what they were really about, is they were looking for mentors to mentor vets into beekeeping. What they do is it's a one-on-one type of situation where you can mentor a vet. So if anybody that's a beekeeper already and wants to get involved in that, that's a plan to go with. Other things is I also do the mentoring stuff online, help people out. They have questions, whatever, I'd be more than happy to help out. How to get started, all those kinds of things.
And then the last thing is we wanted to be sure to invite you to check out our blog, which is kowalskimountain.com. And you can scan that QR code. It'll take you right there. And if you want to follow us on any of your socials, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube. We're on all of it. So you can check us out by finding us for Kowalski Mountain.
And I guess we're finished.
All right. So be sure to stop by our table.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you coming.